Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing a discussion of Tell Me How It Ends, an essay in 40 questions by Valeria Luiselli. This is a book that I read as part of my Social Justice Nonfiction project. I'll link a video about that below if you're curious. And I want to end this discussion video to just talk about some of the issues that she brings up in her book. So this book is a very short, just about 100 pages, essay talking about Luiselli's experiences as a volunteer interpreter for child refugees from Central America who have come to the US and need legal representation in order to apply for asylum or some sort of status in the US. So this book is really a beautiful blend of her gorgeous writing, her own experiences as an immigrant to the United States, the experiences she has asking questions of these child refugees, getting their answers and trying to work with the lawyers on this, as well as just a lot of background about what's going on politically and socially that has led to all of these refugees. I think that this did such a great job of blending all of that into one really good narrative that I think was very easy to follow, very informative, and very engaging. So let me go ahead and talk about some of the key things that I took away from this book about the situation. So first, who are these children? So these child refugees in Luiselli's book are unaccompanied minors. So they are under 18 and they are coming to the US illegally by themselves. They do not have an adult accompanying them. Often it's not just that they have traveled by themselves, but they may not even know where their parents are, or they may have a parent or a relative who's already in the US who has paid for them to make this journey illegally to join them. They are coming from places where they have been in danger, not just that they've been dealing with poverty, but often they are having threats against their lives and threats against their safety that have prompted them to make this very dangerous journey to find a better and safer life. So where are these kids coming from and where are they going to? Most of these kids are coming from Central American countries, places like Honduras and Guatemala, and they are fleeing to the southern border of the US, often places like Texas. What's really interesting is that the influx of child refugees is not really including children from Mexico, but part of the reason why that's not happening is that there is a special rule that children from Mexico can just be deported without any trial because it's an adjoining country border. And that's very interesting, whereas the children from Central America actually have to be processed through the legal system. Next, why are so many children fleeing from Central America? This is a rather complex issue that has a lot to do with history and politics. Luiselli goes into it a little bit, although there is probably a lot more that you can read about this topic. But basically, some of the issues contributing to why so many children are fleeing from Central America have to do with things like the US supporting a lot of violent dictators in Central America in times like the 1970s, things like the illegal drug trade where people in the US are buying drugs from Central America, things also like gangs where there were a lot of gangs that kind of sprung up in the immigrant communities in LA and other places in the US, and then those people were deported back to Central America where those gangs then gained a lot of power and foothold to the extent that there's sort of an issue where a lot of boys are conscripted into the gangs and girls are facing a lot of sexual violence, and if they don't comply, they might be, murdered and face a lot of really dangerous situations, and so they're fleeing from that kind of violence. Next, how are the kids getting to the US? So they get to the US in a very dangerous way. Basically, their families will save up some money to pay a coyote. And a coyote is somebody who will do this kind of run of illegal people up to the southern US border. But they are not trustworthy, and a lot of the kids are abducted, enslaved, killed. 80% of the girls are raped. It is a very, very difficult journey, but a lot of the families think that this is worth it in order to escape that kind of gang violence. Next, what's the process of applying for status once these children have come to the US? So basically, once the kids reach the southern US border, they immediately turn themselves in to Border Patrol because they want to be found and they want to start the legal process of applying for asylum or some other type of status. This is very difficult though. Because of the way that the court system is set up, they are not guaranteed legal counsel, but instead must find their own. And this is difficult because often these kids are very, very poor, they don't speak English, and they need a lawyer to represent them pro bono, which is very hard to find. And it is a very difficult process because basically the lawyers have to prove that these kids need asylum or some other such thing that qualifies them to get status. One of the things in this that Luiselli was talking about is her job as an interpreter was to ask questions of the kids to get a lot of the information so that the lawyers could make decisions about what kind of status to apply for and really which cases to take on because they could not take them all on. And lastly, when do the children have to apply for legal status by, and why is that a problem? So basically, during the Obama administration, there was a big influx of these child refugees from Central America, and there was a decision to fast track these applications, which sounds like a good thing, but it actually was very, very problematic. Previously, the kids had had about a year to find legal representation and make their case, but with this fast tracking system, that was shortened to about 2 months. So within 2 months, the kids somehow had to find a lawyer to work for them pro bono to represent their case, except that the lawyers were inundated because there were so many refugees and the timeline had shortened so much. So this became a very, very big problem. And basically without legal representation, most of these kids were just deported. So that time shifting was actually extremely problematic. So those are some of the main issues surrounding this social justice situation that is in Luiselli's book. I think that her book does such a great job in just about 100 pages of giving a very beautifully written personal story about her experiences with this crisis. And I really liked that she did such a good job of interweaving the specifics of anecdotes and experiences that she had with a lot of the context and what was going on behind the scenes to cause this issue. I think this is a really, really good short introduction to the topic, and I'd highly recommend it. If anybody else has read this book or has read more deeply in the topic and has books that they'd like to recommend to me, I'd love to hear from you. So go ahead and leave me a comment down below.